Hello and welcome to On Books. This is Chris here. So today, I'm really excited. We have a special guest. Neil Strauss is on the show. Neil Strauss, you know from The Game. He wrote The Game, which was his story of going from a zero to hero. This guy this is his true life story. He had trouble talking to girls. He had low self-esteem. And as a journalist for the New York Times and for Rolling Stone, he had access to doing some stories on the pickup artist scene in California. That brought him through this book of The Game, where he comes to live with this group of pickup artists. He comes to become the master of the house and goes on to zero to hero, have dates with Britney Spears, goes out with Courtney Love, hangs with Tom Cruise. It's an amazing book. He's here today on Books to chat about his follow-up to The Game, and this book is entitled The Truth. So The Truth is the follow-up. And let me just frame it like this. At the end of The Game, he can get any girl he wants. Now imagine that for yourself. Imagine you can have anyone you want. You are confident enough and you've built your network, whatever it is, you have the skills to anyone on the street, anyone you meet. Like the dude got Britney Spears' phone number. You can do that. Well, it sounds like you're winning the lottery, right? This is what everybody wants in life. I want someone to love me. I want to date her. I want to sleep with her. This is where he got. Now, what problems would you have? Would this scenario bring to your life? That's what The Truth's about. Because for Neil, the problem was one of monogamy, fidelity, having hard conversations about what he really wanted and what he was really going through in this scenario of his life that he had created for himself, and trying to relate to people on that level. And this book takes him on a quest. It's a quest where he leaves in the beginning of the book. I'm not spoiling anything here. He leaves his girlfriend, who he's been with for a while, Ingrid, because he tells her, I don't believe that I can be with just one person for the rest of my life. And he makes that decision. Throughout the book, his guru, who kind of guides and gives him advice, is Rick Rubin. Freaking Rick Rubin, friend of his. I love Rick Rubin. He's producer of the Beastie Boys, Chili Peppers, Kanye, Johnny Cash, a million people. And he's such a well-spoken, a beautiful spoken human being. And it's lucky. I think we're lucky to get some of his advice throughout it, which is a nice kind of balance to where Neil is in this book. Neil comes out the gate. He breaks up with this woman. He goes on a quest. He goes on a quest to find what life would be like if he was not monogamous. What is the opposite of that? What other lifestyles exist out there? This brings him in this it's a story because it's his story. It's like a narrative nonfiction where it's all true, but it's told as if you're reading a novel. I mean, page 1 of this book, you're just brought right into the story. And Neil takes you, the reader, through his exploration of swinging, sex parties, orgies, the history of that. He has some great interviews, one with the PhD Helen Fisher, who I love. She's done a TED Talk on why we love. That's amazing. He starts a harem in LA as an experiment with these 3 girls, Anne, Belle, and Veronica. He shows the wrong way to run a harem, and then he gets some advice along the way, and well, I'll leave it to that. What I really got from this book is the ability to go into the minds of a dozen or so people who are having relationships that aren't just monogamy. And monogamy is definitely, the standard narrative is definitely one or a few of the people in this book. And it's really interesting to see the different contrasts of different ways people are living and ultimately the decisions that Neil brings himself to as a father and also now as a husband. And even more impactful than that for me has been some great dialogue and examples of how to have hard conversations in relationships and speak the truth of who you are, and seeing these characters in the stories and what telling the truth brings to their lives. So I'm really excited to bring you this conversation with Neil Strauss. At some point, you'll hear he flips the script and starts interviewing me, and you get a real insight into his mind of how it's like therapy. I'm basically in therapy now. He's asking me questions about my relationships, my mother. And it's interesting because you get to see how he battles it. It's like an inner dialogue of the questions he starts to ask me that he likely used as he was writing this book and as he was battling through his understanding of the kind of relationship and the kind of authenticity that he would like to live. Here is my conversation with Neil Strauss.
Well, I think it's interesting to me that you rarely, and we we're talking just before the podcast, that you rarely do books that are stories or don't know how to get into a story, because, you know, my belief is that we learn most, and I'm sure it's yours too, on some level, that we learn most through storytelling. That's how we learn. That's how our brain is wired to learn, through metaphor and through storytelling, and that's why it exists.
Totally.
That if it, and a good argument for that being the case is that if we learn through sort of bulleted points and maxims, that all those memes on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram with inspirational thoughts would actually change our lives, but they don't change our lives. You know, we can look at those all day and still remain the same.
When you started writing it, was there one thing that you set out to because there's so many different places that you go in the book?
Yeah, I don't write with an agenda or a place that I'm going to. I might have an idea, but I'm always willing to discard that idea. It was the same when I was doing journalism and interviews for Rolling Stone, that if I met somebody, I'm open to the process of where it's going. So I probably, first of all, the book, and all my books, or most of my books, don't start off as a book idea. They start off as a problem in my life I'm trying to solve. Then somewhere along the way, I realized that I think I'm learning some things that will really help some other people besides just me. B, I think the things I'm learning aren't things that are out there and things people need to know. And C, hey, if I make this my next book, then I can actually dedicate my career, I can make it my job to become a better person. I can devote a lot more hours and a book advance toward healing myself and sharing that with other people. So if you look at The Game or Emergency or The Truth, that it wasn't really till at least a third into the story in the book that I actually came up with the idea to turn it into a book.
At what point did you say, hey, you were writing enough and you're like, hey, this could be a book?
Yeah. And by the way, the corollary to that also is that with all those books, whatever I sat down to write was different than the book that I ended up writing. Often, and that's why I love nonfiction, or writing nonfiction, is because real life is unpredictable, and it goes in places you don't expect. So I think with this book, there was a moment when I broke up with Ingrid, my girlfriend at the time, and said, hey, I don't think monogamy works. It doesn't seem natural. It doesn't make any logical sense. It doesn't feel like right for me. And I want to go try these alternative relationships that are, and alternatives to monogamy that, are becoming more and more acceptable in our culture.
That's amazing. Yeah, that may be the point when you really got me, when it pulled me in, because that conversation is so hard to have.
Yeah.
I don't know. I see a lot of people who I feel like if they had that conversation, they would just be like more straight with the person that they're with. What was it like having that conversation?
I think that for me, it was painful. It was painful. Yeah. It was really just painful of saying, hey, I love you, but I just don't know if I can be with one person physically and sexually and romantically for the rest of my life, which is hopefully over half of my life. So yeah, it was tough. And again, I think when I made that decision, it really felt like I was making the right decision, like I was making a smart decision for myself. But when I wrote it and I read it, it really became clear on the page that it was a dumb, stupid decision motivated by complete fear.
Breaking up with her was motivated by fear.
Breaking up with her, being afraid to be, even listen to what I said, I don't think I'm afraid that I can't be with one person. I'm afraid not to have any more romance and sexuality in my life. I think it was all fear motivated and sort of
Yeah, and so that's the journey you go on. Like you do all this, you live this certain way to try to, like, you're on this quest essentially, right? To like figure out what that fear is.
Yeah, the quest was to discover that fear, to discover why weren't relationships working for me, and also if you look at the statistics, for like, more than 75% of the people who are in them, if not more, like, why is the divorce rate so high? Why are people who don't divorce so unhappy? Why are something like 90% of couples unhappy after the birth of their first child? Why is the
Yeah.
infidelity rate so high? Why are people living compartmentalized secret lives that their partners don't know about? Like, it just felt like a broken model to me.
Yeah, I mean, even after reading the book, like it still feels like a broken model. It just, I feel like by reading the book, I know someone, like, I know you through your words now, like, and I'm like, okay, I know someone who went on this journey, but it still feels like broken.
I mean, I think, again, like, I think the real answer is that it's not the model that's broken; it's ourselves that are broken. Like, it's ourselves. If we're not capable of connecting in a healthy way with other people, and staying with them if it's healthy, and leaving them if it's not healthy, then it's us that's broken. So, I mean, the things that I wanted to accomplish with the book were, one, most importantly, just a book that once you read the first page, you can't put it down.
Yeah.
I think that's the other problem I have with a lot of, say, self-help type of books. They're just laborious, really laborious to read, and take me a long time to read. Whereas I love a story because I can just whip through a story, and I just want to write the kind of books that I want to read, which is that, like, okay, I can't wait to get alone and crack open this book and sink into this amazing world that's been created on the page. That's why I love books, and that's the first thing I want to convey is just, hey, I want you to not be able to put this book down, and for it to bring pleasure and joy into your life, because what is life for if not to enjoy it? And the second thing is to leave a trail of breadcrumbs through the story so that you can hopefully understand yourself better, understand your relationships better, understand why you make the choices you make, and why you choose the partners you choose, and how to get to the other side of that.
Yeah. I think that much was clear. Like figuring out, I don't know. I saw myself in you a lot, and I saw you were able to take these stands and do these things that, I mean, a lot of guys, myself included, you see this and you're like, oh, I've thought of that, but I've never done that. I've never even just being, to be honest, like when I saw that the title was The Truth, I thought, oh, this is going to be like the truth about something, and I'm not sure what you intended in it, but to me, it started to just mean like it's about telling the truth, like that. Those are the morsels that I got from it, and like being truthful to yourself, like that was.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. That's why I did the subtitle "An Uncomfortable Book About Relationships," because, like, it's really uncomfortable. People are so scared to share their truth with other people because they're worried they'll be judged. They're worried someone will hurt. They're worried the person will have emotions that they can't control. So a lot of times people would rather uh, lie and be safe than tell the truth and be vulnerable, or be unable to control the other person's reaction. So I think by avoiding the truth, we hurt our relationships. The other reason I named it The Truth was it felt like the opposite of the game. If the game was about, the game, and there's some level of, obviously, inauthenticity in the game, and I think for a relationship, you need a high degree of authenticity.
That's pretty great. In writing a book, because I know you said you aim to solve problems. With this book, do you feel like you've solved it, or you've conquered this subject, or at least enough for you? Do you feel like you've got that out there?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, definitely, I have for me, in terms of, yeah, like, Ingrid and I both say, like, we're, Ingrid being my wife now, not that we're the happiest we've ever been in our entire lives than we are right now. So I feel like really good. There's no part of my life and sexual desires and proclivities and feelings that she's not privy to, and all the things I was scared of turned out to be the best things in my life. So I really dealt with the deep, deep, deep inner issues that were really, like, kind of keeping me alone and isolated and thinking that was life. So that's for sure. And then, as far as, and I said everything I wanted to say in the book, but I do make a decision in my books, and the decision is this: if it doesn't drive the story forward, I remove it. So there might have been some things that I wanted to say in the book that I felt would really help other people with their relationships. And but if it didn't drive the story forward, I just removed it because nothing. I just want I just want you to read it. I don't know what your experience was, but I want you to read it like just a slide greased with butter, and if all of a sudden there's a big bump in there, or there's all of a sudden you're going across sandpaper, it's not going to be a comfortable experience. So I remove that, and often sometimes I'll do a follow-up book. I'm probably going to do one to this where it has like kind of I did after the game. I did rules of the game. I'm probably going to do a book that at least takes some of the lessons and says them in a just straightforward way. However, back to our discussion at the top of this podcast, is it's interesting that the game, which was the story, and rules of the game, which was really all the information, that the game was 3 times more successful, and it's the book people always refer to, versus rules of the game, which is really just the data.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think there's that attachment to the story. I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of girls that have read the game. I think there's probably like some plausible deniability too, where there's just like, yeah, I'm just reading a story of this thing and this world. Where rules of the game feels a little bit more like, I don't know. It's a different target.
Yeah. It's like reading Playboy for the articles.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
But I think it's that. And I also think too that there's hope for transformation. That I think a lot of self-improvement or business authors, they write about their own problems, but they disguise them as like, I'm just the guru on the mountain. But how do they get there? Like what is good about the game or the truth. And any of my other books is I'm probably starting at the same point like the most hopeless person is, and getting to the point of someone who can stand up on a stage and talk about these things. And you're there for the journey. You don't just get the end result. So because I always think, if someone else can do it, then I can do it, right? If someone else can do it, I can do it. So I think there's something for hope in any of these stories that, okay, you can start at A and go to Z, and that's if it's possible for this dude who wrote this book, or if I can really believe someone did it, then I know I can do it myself.
Yeah, it's inspiring because you can connect to a person. You also get their point of view. I mean, that's the way I felt. It was like I could see. I mean, again, that conversation that you had with Ingrid, I reread that for sure because it was just like, oh my God, like I really was just like, how do you even have this conversation? That marriage might not be right for me, or I don't know. It was so honest. It was so truthful, and then connecting to that and then seeing where that takes you. It was almost like you did it for me, and I got to.
and I think, and this is the other reason why I love, fiction or narrative nonfiction the most, is you can show other perspectives that in the books, like there are parts where you get Ingrid's point of view or parts where you get other characters' points of view. So it isn't just me and what I'm preaching. You can see another side of the story. You get to see the world in 360 degrees. So you can make your own choice, because someone could read this book and make a completely different choice than I did, based on maybe what one of the other characters did. For example, there's somebody in the book named Adam who actually, so my problem was I couldn't commit. His problem was he couldn't get out of a commitment. He was married and miserable. Like, he'd go home and ask his wife if she wanted to hear about his day, and she'd say, no thanks, and he was competing athletic events, and his wife wouldn't come to see him or support him or even ask him how he did, and they weren't having sex, and yet he couldn't leave this marriage. So I thought, okay, not everyone shares my experience of being unable to commit. Some people share the experience of I'm in a relationship that is harmful to my spirit, and yet I can't get out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that being this idea of being truthful and authentic would help Adam?
Yeah. In fact, he fortunately it took him a long time, but he finally he happened one day. He got drunk on cough syrup,
okay,
and just told his wife the truth, and it was the best thing that ever happened to him.
Really?
Yeah. I find often the things we're most afraid to tell others and most afraid to share are often the things we should be saying and sharing if we do it in a compassionate way.
Should people be sharing more?
People should be what I call congruent, which is who you are on the outside matches who you are on the inside, matches how you portray yourself in the world.
Got it.
So I think congruence would help versus creating a reality on Instagram where you're living the most glamorous life.
Yeah.
But these are just, you had you're staging these photos to portray something in the world that you're not congruent with, and that lead to internal anxiety and pain. So I think congruence is healthy for your soul.
Yeah, definitely. And like part of where that comes from as well is like, it's so vulnerable to put yourself out there. Like, do you think of yourself as like Neil Strauss, one person who wrote the book, and then there's like a persona or like a character, or is there a congruency between, like, is this like just 100% like everything who you are?
I mean, the answer is it's everything that's relevant to the book and the journey in the book. So in other words, everything in there is the raw truth, but of course I'll not put in other parts that aren't relevant to the central theme on which it revolves, which is relationships, alternative relationships, marriage, trauma, healing, becoming a more self-aware person, neuroplasticity, and the idea that we can change. So I think the answer is I put in all the parts of myself authentically, but only the parts, and this is really the skill of the difference between like a indulgent book and hopefully interesting or useful book is, but I put in the parts not to share them because I'm just trying to share myself, but putting in the parts because I know if I say the things that are relevant to the story, that are the most vulnerable and true for me, that I don't want to say, then other people who also hide and share these parts of themselves will feel heard or connected or know they're not alone. So I think by sharing those, I think if we showed those parts of ourselves that are true and authentic, other people would be excited about sharing them too. And I think we're probably getting into a world right now, thanks to social media, where people are more afraid to be vulnerable. I mean, any mistake you make can go viral. A high school kid now doesn't have to be just scared of humiliation within his class or her class or his or her school. It could be like, a humiliation worldwide that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. And so you're not allowed to make a mistake and look stupid or be vulnerable, and or you're allowed to, but you got to face the consequences, which are intense humiliation and ostracization. I'm saying the word wrong.
Ostracized?
Ostracism. Ostracism.
Yeah.
So the stakes to be vulnerable are much higher. So I would love to be living in a world where it's okay to fail, it's okay to be wrong, it's okay to make mistakes, and that's how we learn, and be accepting of that. And I think that ties into what we said centrally at the beginning, and I think you were discussing about why is marriage hard, or why are these hard? These what's the problem with these things? Why is the institution broken? And I think the answer is that we don't learn to be emotionally intelligent as human beings. We're taught to be physically healthy. We go to hospitals if we're sick. We're taught we're given an intellectual education, however, lacking it may be through the school system. But we do nothing for emotional health or emotional intelligence. And so consequently, when we get in emotional relationships, if we haven't really been raised in a really loving, nurturing way by supportive, needless, boundary setting, emotionally healthy parents, which is much rarer than one might think, all that shit comes out.
Oh yeah. Is like, what would you recommend? Like what can I do? Like, if I like to learn, like, is there, or for kids these days, I mean, you mentioned having blogs, and it's the sharing, and where can people learn? Like, what would you do?
Right. I mean, I can tell you what I'm doing is as being a new father is the first thing I'm doing is really learning about the stuff and then passing it on. Is passing it on to my child. So to that generation. So the first thing we can do is really understanding the stuff and teaching it, because I think we really don't know. And if you really start to study about, I'll give you an example of something I did, which is I wrote a note to my son and said, before he was born, and said, your parents and I, your mom and I love each other very much, and we made this decision to bring you into the world, and you're coming, and we love you, and we're so excited for you to join our lives and help you and just be great parents for you, and really just let him know that whatever may happen in life, he can stand on a solid platform being loved, which a lot of people don't have. I know my mom told me I was an accident. I know other people, parents left really early in their life, so they walk around, there's a deficiency, a feeling like, why am I not enough? Why did my parents give me up for adoption? So I was an accident. I wasn't wanted. It sort of is a core wound that people, walk around with from the beginning. So the first thing I did was try to do that. And the second thing honestly, I think we can do is start to emotionally educate that to make, emotional education a part of our education, that, whether it's through the school system, whether it's through a therapeutic system, if we can kind of improve that, whether it's through week long or weekend intensives, start to grow at each appropriate age, grow children up. I think even tribes, had rituals through which a boy or girl became an adult.
What's the closest thing we have to that right now? Is there anything?
No, we have nothing. Evidence of that, it's all the very grown up children, walking around. I think that the closest thing I experienced to it was I did this week. There's a lot of intensive, great week long, emotionally kind of purging, healing programs where you really understand how you were raised, how those issues affect you, and then you sort of emotionally purge that stuff. And it's hard to talk about it without explaining it properly, but a lot of it's based on Gestalt therapy, chair work. And there are other variations of that and other places that do that. But I almost think for me, it was a nice ritual of saying, oh, I am letting go of my childhood. I'm divorcing my parents. You can still love your parents, but you don't have to, some parents don't want to parent their children till the day they die, Yeah. But there comes a time when you have to actually let go of your parents and go live your own life. And I'm finding a problem in our culture is that parents cling to their kids even as the kids are adult. They're still trying to guide their lives. They're still trying to use them to get some needs met.
Oh my God, yeah.
And we don't allow children to separate and become their own person, become independent, truly independent.
Yeah, there was something, I did a similar kind of weekend thing. I did Landmark. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was like
I know Landmark. Yeah,
actually, I just did it this weekend, so I'm like
I'm
coming out of that headspace. One of the things that I learned there was just like, it's like your parents are not responsible for you anymore, and just hearing that, I was like, what the hell? Like, I just never. There's all these things that I hold, and seeing the ways it manifests, it's like you have these blind spots, you have these things that you don't know, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I am responsible for myself. Just for me, just hearing that, it was just so, I don't know, it was just so freeing. I don't know. I can't explain it.
No, exactly. I know. Like, there's a bunch of different sort of groups. Like, I think honestly, and people always will talk shit about any kind of all this kind of stuff, but I think honestly, anything you're doing that has the aim of self-knowledge or self-understanding and self-awareness is helpful. And exactly what you said is the problem. We are too close to ourselves to see ourselves clearly and to get out of our own way.
Yeah. And
this is something you can't do alone. So for certain, there's a bunch of different places and organizations and ways to do it. And nothing helps. Going to anything is a step in the right direction. And then also, I think the change really takes humility too, because you live with yourself for so long that as someone once told me, the same head that got you into this mess isn't really going to get you out of it.
Yeah.
So it takes to really change takes some humility, because you're a lot of the beliefs that get in our way are literally wired into our brains, that we're born and we have these, we have our brain matter and all our neurons there, but the actual architecture of it is mostly built by those childhood experiences. So we are like living in a box, and we can't see the outside of that box. So that's why I think another thing you said, what can we do as a culture or society, is creating these groups or safe spaces where you can sort of help to see yourself from outside yourself through kind of guided expertise and start to become aware of your own patterns. And in so many cultures outside of the U.S., it's seen as it's shameful to go to therapy. It's shameful because it means something's wrong with you.
And sometimes like therapy isn't necessarily helpful because it just kind of like, it's good to get it out, but there's no. So here's something that I want to share with you that I think you'll find interesting is like when I was reading the book, I was reminded of somewhere in Art of Loving, the Eric Frome book. He talks about how like love is an art, and a lot of people have never seen good examples of that. I don't know if you read the book, I think, right?
Yeah. I've read it. It's a great book.
It's such a great book. And when I was reading your book, I was thinking, I have never seen great examples of someone who was so truthful with, Ingrid at the time, the whole thing, but in the beginning, good examples of somebody learning about polyamory, going to sex parties, starting harem, like all of these things. They come to me with, my own prejudices and stories and all this stuff, right? There's like no good example of that. Whether you saw it, whether I saw it on the internet or whether you see it here. Actually, I have a lot of friends that run sex parties in New York City, and I don't feel connected to them though, because it's like I just don't know they're not necessarily. I just don't have access in a way. So there was something about reading your previous works, from The Game to Emergency, and I feel like you get the point of view of an author, and then seeing it through your eyes, which I felt like, back to the Eric Frome thing, I was like, whoa, this is like the first good example out there of like a healthy approach to explaining the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think it's interesting to say it really is true. A lot of the book was really learning to love and learning how to love. And that's where it goes back to the emotional stuff is like, I guess that what I found the solution was for this stuff was, and by the way, yeah, I think it's true. I was just talking to a friend who was in his marriage, and he said, you know what, reading your book made me realize that I don't have to go out and live all my fantasies. They're not going to be like I think they're going to be. Yes. So it's him in that way. But yeah, that I want to say, like, I don't think I'm advocating therapy because I don't think that system works. And I know that it's like sitting in a room and talking to someone for an hour for whatever it is, 100, 200, 300 an hour every week is just not going to work. I mean, it does work for some people. I don't want to be negative about it.
I understand.
But I think that the trauma, the knowledge, everything got in there. Sometimes when we were pre-intellectual, so it got in through our feelings, and sometimes it has to go out through the feelings. But there are all these great stuff happening. So I guess the answer to your previous question about emotional education is, I think we can just find the healthy institutions, just like we have hospitals and schools. We can have maybe a third institution that shows emotional health, but we have to really relearn it as a culture. Emotional health, we really don't know it. Like we don't know it. There's so many ideas that are seen as good or important in our culture that really are detrimental ideas we have, such as the idea that we're responsible for the feelings of others, or my job is to make a husband might say, my job is to make my wife happy. Well, you can't make somebody happy. It's like it's a choice they make.
And it's like we don't have the language. We don't have like the right language around these things. It's so like everybody is just on their own. Like, so, but
you're really on your own, and there are no guide. Like most therapists suck. Like talk therapy is pretty, is weak. If you go to, again, I haven't been to Landmark, but I know, if you go to something like that, people are like, oh, you're in a cult. Like, so, you're shamed out of everything.
You got to keep it on wraps. Yeah.
Feel alone. And so the answer is, why are you honest and vulnerable in books? The answer is to maybe help people feel not alone and like they can change. I can tell you what I did, which was once I found what was wrong with me, I treated it almost like it was a cancer, like a psychological cancer. And so, if you find out you have cancer, you're going to do every treatment possible to, remove that to it. You're going to attack that smartly and aggressively, and with every treatment available that's not going to hurt you too much, and you're going to educate yourself. And so I did the same thing with the psychological stuff. I just thought, I'm just going to throw every type of therapy and experience at it till I can take it and really minimize it, so that it's not destroying my heart.
Did you just kind of figure it out for yourself? I mean, or was that part of I know in part of the book you go through sex therapy, I think that's what you call it, refer to it as, during the book. Was that during that period of your life, or was this just kind of like an ongoing thing that you, like, Neil dealt with himself?
Yeah, I think it was toward the end when I realized that, and I remember like my friend Rick like did this with losing weight, so it doesn't have to do with the psychological stuff. That when I realized that everything I thought would work didn't work, and I exhausted all my possibilities as far as using my brain, I sort of, with complete humility, said, you know what, I don't know, but I know this needs to change.
Yeah.
And just found experts and tried to sort of accept and try to really accept their experience and authority and submit to in a determined way to letting go of the past and changing and embracing the future. So I think, it was the first time I really had to deal with humility, like really abject humility.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's something that's hard to read. I think it's so experiential. Because
it's hard to explain. It's funny, like we're talking about this book and the game is easy. The game is just about behaviors. This is about beliefs. And it's funny. Even as I'm talking, I find it hard to explain because go ahead with your question, but I'm just saying I just find it hard to explain because we only know what we know. And so how can you know what you don't know? How can you experience what you don't experience? How can you really step outside your comfort zone and live the life that is waiting for you instead of the one you're stuck in?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's like, I'm at this interesting point in my life where when I saw this book come out, I read a lot. I mean, a lot of the books that you mentioned in the book, I'm like, yep, read that.
Right.
So I feel like I'm on like a similar, and I've been trying to be, even before reading The Truth, just extra, just like authentic and truthful in all my relationships, like especially keenly aware of that recently, and just feeling, just like sitting with that and feeling like, yeah, what is it like to tell, the girl I'm dating, like that maybe that marriage isn't right for me. And there's something about saying it aloud that there's some kind of like ownership over it, or it makes it less scary for me. And there's something about like even talking with you about it right now where, I mean, you feel like, like an author through the book, but like, there's just like, I think there's like a way that I guess I feel like with beliefs, right? That you can start to craft a reality of like, oh, okay, this is okay to talk about. Like I can be a person who, I mean, even on this podcast, like isn't afraid to just like be more truthful and like not hide. And that's the experiential part where it's like, if you just read a book, I think that's like what I'm really trying to get at, even with the podcast, is like, if you just read a book and just like, okay, I did that, I'm on to the next book. There's no like, you have to like live, you have to like fucking live a book. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. No, exactly. You got to live your own journey that's different than everybody else's journey. There's the great Joseph Campbell metaphor with the Knights of the Holy Grail who go on a quest for the Holy Grail, but if they see a path, they can't take it. They have that because it's someone else's path. They have to go into the forest where it's deepest and darkest, and the most monsters are there. And the monsters, of course, are their own unconscious demons, and will work through the brambles and fight the battles to get there. And it's unique for everybody. So let me ask you, because I think I noticed there's the theme coming up for you, which is that moment when about monogamy or marriage not being right for you. How do you know marriage isn't right for you?
Ooh. All right, here comes all the stories. Ready?
Yes.
No, I do think I am interested in being with someone and finding. I just don't know if the standard definition, like the standard narrative of what marriage is, like just having sex with one person and only one person for the rest of my life it scares me. It's very, because I don't know what will change. Like I don't know who I'm going to be in 10 years, and that's like a really scary road to get on.
Right, and yeah, it's interesting. You definitely sound like a lot like me at that point in the book. So I feel like that's the point. But and the truth is, I found a lot of my problems came from worrying about the future. Like we really have no idea about the future, and I found like most problems came from the baggage of the past and fear of the future. And I found that my relationship changed for me the moment I just said I lived in the right now with her. I'm like, just do I love you right now? Do I love being with you and enjoy being with you right now? And I find by just asking that question, you get to have a lot of right nows and a greater future than just always thinking, hey, this is going to work in 10 years. Will I be happy in 10 years? You don't even get to enjoy that right now. Yeah. And even the parts when we're in conflict, it's like I actually enjoy the conflict when it occurs because we recover really quickly and learn something from it. And I love that. So let me ask you, because what tips me off that this really doesn't have to do with the institution of marriage for you is also what you said about your experience, your big epiphany at the seminar you went to, that you don't, that your parents' job is it? Would you say your parents' job of parenting is over? That you don't, that you, what was it, the exact epiphany you said?
Yeah, my parents are no longer responsible for my life.
Right. Okay. Cool. And in what ways did you feel your parents were responsible for your life before?
Um, I think it's just like having to give myself to their ideas, and maybe not being. I think there's even something with just like the word saying. I don't know,
Say, finish that sentence to give yourself to their ideas and finish
yeah,
that sentence.
yeah, thanks, yeah. To give myself to their ideas of like what a marriage or a healthy way. I don't know. Like I just turned 35. I think there was always a ticking time bomb of like I should be married by 35. Do you know what I mean? And when I turned 35, I started dealing with it
Wait,
like
you're dancing away. It's great. There's something here because you're dancing.
okay, okay.
So what were their ideas? Because you're talking about some general idea. What were their ideas?
Their ideas. You know you get married, you live in the suburbs, you have two kids, and you stay in it. I guess here it is. It's you stay in a relationship, in a marriage, whatever it is, because that's what you do. Whether and you don't complain, and as far as I know, you don't cheat. There's just that idea.
It's interesting how you depersonalize it too, and jump to you instead of saying I or they. It's fascinating. Like if you see each time I try to take you to that point, you like jump off like through almost like this intense,
Or am I?
fascinating psychological defense mechanism. When someone says you and you and you when they're talking about themselves,
Yeah,
it's almost like a distancing thing. So let me ask you: were they happy in their marriage or just stuck together?
I think they're. I think they're just
You're
stuck.
scared they're going to listen to this now. Hold up,
Yeah.
one finger for yes and two for no.
I'm
Not twice.
no, 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 no.
Okay, that's what.
I'm not hiding anything. So let's go for it. Yeah, I think that they're stuck, but I think that they're happy in like a friend, platonic kind of way. I think that that's just not attractive to me because it feels stuck. For me, that would feel stuck.
And what were their expectations? And is there an expectation or pressure that you would get married or something like that, or
Yeah, my
like
brother and sister are married, and it just seems. Yeah, I mean, there's no like pressure. There's no like direct like you have to do this. Um, I don't know. I think it's somewhere between that and like having an ex girlfriend who her father cheated on the family,
uh-huh.
and it broke up the family, and so it's just having examples that aren't necessarily that was really scarring for me to have to
I
like.
get, and so what way? And again, maybe you can't. Maybe it's hard to. Maybe being vulnerable is hard, knowing that certain people may listen to it. But what way? I'm just fascinated by this responsibility thing, and what way you felt responsible to them.
Yeah, just I don't know if it's like taking taking care of the family or just like living up to one idea of like what a son's supposed to be. Like this guy
Right.
that gets married and like I guess I feel like every year I'm not doing that. Like I'm in New York City, I have a studio, I'm dating different girls. Like I have this kind of like really fun life. I don't know, I guess I feel like I'm ticking or something away from what that's supposed to be.
If you're still at 35 feeling responsible to your parents or feeling like somehow you living your own life, you're not allowed to do certain things because it may upset them or you're supposed to do a certain thing so it'll make them happy, then of course, as soon as you get in a relationship and you feel they have any kind of expectations, it's just going to be psychologically too much. You're going to want to withdraw from the relationship because if you just look at it on a logical level, it's a realistic, logical level. A relationship and a marriage is something you are free to leave at any point in time. You're free to leave at any point. Nobody says, I mean, even look at the world, like, people survive after having a divorce. They survive
Yeah.
after splitting up. These relationships end. But when we're too scared to get into a relationship because we're scared of what may happen in 10 years, not realizing we're not children. We have total control over the outcome it seems to me pathological on some level. And by pathological, I mean coming out of this stuff we've been talking about, unhealthy trauma versus just being in reality.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. How often do you talk to your mom?
Probably once a week. That's something I'm trying to work on is just having better conversations with her, if you know what I mean. Just like
Yeah, I know what. Don't work on having better conversations with her. Work on having more shallow conversations with her.
I
That
know, but that's what you did in the book, and I was like, I don't. That seems like the wrong thing to do.
why wrong to who? Wrong to her, but right to you.
But then why even have the conversation? Why it seems like I'm wasting my time. Why not just like blow her off altogether?
Do whatever is healthy for you. You don't owe her anything.
Whoa, that's deep, dude. That is. I remember that part of the book. I was just like,
I
okay,
mean, listen, I'm saying this as a father who just had a son.
yeah,
Like he does not owe me anything. Like every day I get to take care of him as a joy. He brings so much happiness into my life that he owes me nothing as an adult other than to live his life. And so you kind of have that. choice now. It's fascinating that someone's told me whenever you feel guilt, it means you're doing the work of separation. Whenever you feel guilt, and so doing the things you feel guilty with around your mom will help you finally complete growing up and separate. And it goes back, everything ties together in this interview, but we go back to those rituals. A lot of those tribal rituals we're talking about were really about separation. People were forcibly taken from, mom or dad or the parents and left alone, and they they got to become adults by separating from their parents. And here we don't have that ritual, and so we are chained by guilt. So my thought is, instead of trying to have better conversations with her, she's not going to change. Don't go to the places that press your buttons, and draw a boundary and keep it.
And is that working for you? How often do you talk to your mother right now?
Well, I'll tell you something interesting.
Yeah.
which is that when I decided to draw the boundary, and my stuff was around keeping her secrets and listening to her receptacle to listen about how awful dad is and how dad is bad and dad's horrible and dad does these things to her and she's a victim of dad. I drew the boundaries and she didn't talk to me for a while. And then she kind of reappeared via text and started, having me keep a bunch of secrets. And I responded to her. I said, "Hey, I'm happy to talk about anything, but I just can't keep secrets anymore. Keeping secrets caused me to cheat on, I want to live a true, authentic life. I don't want to cheat on people. I want to be honest with them. And so I'm happy to, I said this in a shorter way, so I said, I'm happy to talk about anything. I just can't keep secrets anymore or listen to stuff about dad. And do you know what she responded?
What'd you say?
Nothing. That's the last time I heard from her. Not even a response.
How long ago was that?
It was this 4 or 5 months ago.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But it was incredibly freeing because it made me realize that if I wasn't there, that if I didn't have a use, then I wasn't necessary to her life, and allowed me to let go, to say, oh, okay, like that's what the relationship is. I serve a use for her, and now she is enlisted another family member in that use, that I don't have to feel guilty. I don't, unless show me what the relationship was.
Well, hey, Neil, it sounds like you're going to be an amazing father.
I hope so. And you know what? And I will make mistakes. And what I'll do is, try to recognize and admit them and repair them when I do. We'll all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But thank you. I hope so.
Oh, for sure. And I hope there's a book out there for keeping a marriage that you write and for raising a son, because I feel like there's a lot. I feel like a lot of your books are about survival. Everything from the game to emergency to like you're constantly trying to survive. And I think there's more aspects that when I finished this book, I was like, well, what about all these other things?
No, I think you're right. And the more I kind of do these interviews and I talk to you about how scary it is to let go of the stuff with your mom, I think I'm going to write, I really want to write something about that. I think there's a lot to write. I think maybe this book, like you said, has really opened the door on a lot of things that I think are important to challenge in our culture. So thanks for a good conversation.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with me and Neil Strauss. This is On Books. Right after having that conversation, I went on a date and I was inspired to go beyond how I usually put myself out there in conversation, in dates. And one thing that I feel like I always kind of put off, I noticed this about myself in having that conversation, is that I put things off. I always find there's always a better time to have these truthful conversations. For me, this is my kind of my act of what I do. And I'll often just say, yeah, I'll have that talk later. I know it's important, but I'll do it tomorrow, And what actually happens? Well, it happens too late in too many cases. And then what I find is that I've dug a hole, or I've lived maybe white lies, or, not truly giving myself. And it makes me scared. So let me cut to the example of after this. I was on a date, and there was that quiet period after making out for a bit, and you're kind of quiet, and you're kind of sitting there, and racing through my head was this conversation that I had just 2 hours previously had with Neil Strauss, and thinking I had this whole thing that I was able to share, with the podcast, all these things, with you, and all these thoughts on monogamy. And I'm afraid to say them to this one person. I'm afraid to say that maybe I don't believe in monogamy. And my reason right then was, well, we've only been on a handful of dates, and a few dates, and it's not enough. Like this is like a 3-month thing, or like a 6-month thing. I just make all these things up in my head. So I'm not going to talk about this now. But at the same time, I felt very uncomfortable because I feel this way, and it's on my mind. It was clearly on my mind because I'd had this whole conversation. So why not share myself? And literally up until the moment when I realized I could share myself, I started to just feel a sense of being nauseous, or kind of a little thumping in my lower stomach, this kind of anxiety. And I don't know why, I don't know why. I guess fear of being rejected, fear of being out with a girl in New York City and saying, maybe I have questions about monogamy, and her taking it, I was looking out for her because I'm afraid she's going to go, oh, you're rejecting me, or, oh, you're a player, or whatever. Like I have all these things going through my head, and it's easier not to say it. But I said it. It went something like, hey, I just want to share something with you. And I said, I have complicated thoughts about marriage and monogamy and where things might be going. And I just want to share with you that I want to try to be honest with you right now. And I'm letting you just know that's it. That's it. That's all I said. It came out not super, clear cut. It maybe a little sloppy, maybe a little unromantic. I'm not sure, but I'm trying to find romance in being truthful, because just by saying that, I immediately felt relaxed. I immediately felt more authentic, and it almost didn't even matter what she said afterwards. So I could stop it right there, but I'll just say that she was very responsive and very curious about how I had formed these thoughts, and she had sympathy and empathy, I would even say, because she felt similar ways, and it led into a really great conversation. And it all just started with me kind of somewhat fumbling through a few things that I just felt, and just sharing that, and getting to listen to her story. And honestly, that was enough. And I want to continue to share. I want to continue to have and provide you with good examples from myself, from my own life, from authors, from people, to be better people in the world. I think that if we can see great examples of these conversations, of these books, of these lives lived, that we can push ourselves to become better. And that's what I want for you. And that's why I'm here making this podcast, because there's a lot of great stories and examples of how to live an authentic human life that are trapped in books. And I want to bring that to you. That's it. That's what we're doing here. So I want to thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed On Books, there are a few dozen other episodes. I dive into books like Mating in Captivity, Sex at Dawn, Malcolm Gladwell books like Blink. There's a bunch of other books. You can find them all for free on iTunes. That's me on Books, chatting about a dozen or few dozen books. iTunes, just search On with a space books, or you can go to my website, on-books.com. If you have questions for me, you can always email me. I'm Chris at on-books.com. I'm also on Twitter, on the Twitter at onbooksshow, on the Facebook at /onbooksshow. Whew, so many different ways to stay in touch, to give me feedback. And I hope you're enjoying everything you're listening to. Let me know how it's resonating. Next week's book is The Artist's Way, and I'll give you some tips and exercises from the book to help cultivate your creativity. There's 2 really big takeaways from the book that I want to share with you. So if you want that, please download the On Books podcast. That's it, On Books. Tell a friend or two. Keep listening. Every week there's a new episode. Enjoy.